Jude and Christine, I wanted to ask you both about kind of the state landscape, and maybe start with Christine specifically in Utah, because again, this idea of open enrollment isn't just about sort of loosening the lines, so to speak, but it's really about helping to make sure the incentives are aligned, the information is transparent in such a way that parents are more in the driver's seat of being able to make sure their kids are in the best educational environment for them. And as part of that, you've done some work here at Sutherland on a new open enrollment excellence certificate program. So I would like to ask you about that. Maybe tell our audience what that is and why you think that's something that's valuable for this ongoing effort to try and improve open enrollment policy here in Utah. And then we'll also get into some of the legislative efforts.
Sure. So the Open Enrollment Excellence Certificate is really aimed at awareness, right? So we've discussed before how districts often aren't in compliance with the part of the law that requires them to post this data, but we've also noticed that it's sometimes a lack of awareness. We've done a lot of outreach, and we'll get some good responses back. So I think a lot of it is districts are so overwhelmed with a lot of different requirements, and so we're sensitive to that as well. But in letting them know, hey, this is the requirement, and then giving praise where it's deserved, right? So this certificate, it comes down to this 5-part rubric. 1, are you in compliance with that part of the law? Then the other 4 are really just best practices from our perspective. How would a parent use this? How would a parent interact well with something on a website? So the second would be, do you use simple designations to show that a school is open or closed? It's not currently required by the law. So that could be like a red or a green, coloring there, or just an open and closed next to the language. There are some districts who went above and beyond and included that, and it's actually really useful. And that's something that would be very helpful for a parent that's looking for options. The third is that they post applications, right? So that's just like being very functional when you're looking for this information. The fourth is to have contact information for whoever is over open enrollment or alternatives in the school district, things like that. We found that that's a little bit hard to find as well. And then the fifth is that there's like a whole web page potentially dedicated to open enrollment or public auctions in that area that they can host. So there are some that have this standard already, and there's a lot obviously that do not. But again, we want to increase awareness. We want to find a way to motivate and incentivize. We, not just follow the law, which is great, but that's a bare minimum, and we can do even more than that. Something I've written about. And so this is kind of what that's aimed at.
Jude, when you hear that kind of outline from Christine, how do you see that fitting into this overall discussion, and especially with what you've seen in other states? You've written about open enrollment progression in states across the country like New Hampshire and Michigan and Mississippi and many others, I believe. So when you kind of look at what could be done at a state level, there's obviously a legislative component, which we'll also get to in a little bit more detail. But then something like this that's a certificate program that's sort of trying to incentivize, I guess, and sort of outline here are not things you can do, not just in terms of complying with the law, but best practices. Is that common in other states? Is it not common? Is it the kind of thing we should all be striving for?
Yeah, so some districts, like Christine said, are just really good at posting information about their overall programs on their websites. And having information online is important. It's because parents need to know when, where, and how to transfer schools. If that information is not posted online, then I don't really know how they're going to find out about it. I suppose they could like walk into a school building and say, "Hello, I would like to transfer," but I don't think most parents have the time to do that, especially if there's no guarantee that that transfer could occur. So just being really transparent about these processes is really important. There are at least 8 states that require districts by law to post their open enrollment policies and procedures and their available capacity by grade level online. I think that's a great policy to have in place because it just makes it really easy for families to learn about the transfer opportunities available to them. And one thing I noticed well is like the open enrollment participation can get really, really robust. Colorado, which is pretty close to you guys, 29% of public school students in Colorado use open enrollment. That means they're transferring either across district boundaries or within district boundaries to attend schools that are a better fit for them. And what that tells me is that they know about these options, and schools are advertising about transfer opportunities, and they're making sure it's really easy for families to learn about how to transfer. So I think that's a great example of how this program can really grow and be robust, and why it's important to make it easy for families to learn about these opportunities.
I want to hone in on the why for a minute, and Christine, ask you with something like this, sort of again trying to strive for the best practices idea of open enrollment policy. I want to ask you, how do you see this fitting into kind of the broader education choice landscape or discussion or even debates that we're having as a state? And how does this kind of reform, essentially trying to improve our open enrollment, either best practices or public policies as a state, or I guess compliance with those public policies, how do you see that kind of aligning with just the broad principles of education choice? And you've written about it for the Sutherland Insights blog, an article about the education choice principles that Utah shouldn't forget. So kind of where do you see this fitting into those broader conversations and in pursuit of those broader principles that would kind of lead to this idea of true excellence when it comes to choice and open enrollment?
Yes. So exactly. Utah is having this ongoing discussion about education choice in the state, what we really want it to look like. Fine-tuning private choice is definitely happening right now as well. But from our perspective, education choice is this really broad umbrella, right? And it just means any of the options, and you as the parent in the driver's seat are making those decisions. So if I were to narrow it down to two things, it's robust options and informed parents. And whether we're talking about the private lane or the public lane, that's really what the goal is. And so if we were to look at each segment with that standard in mind, if we're looking at open enrollment, we say, okay, robust options. We have plenty of school districts and schools and specialties and things within that. That's fantastic. Now we need informed parents. And that's really where I think a lot of the reforms are centered around, making sure that they understand. And this is something that I've talked about with different people about transparency. Transparency can be like, hey, is the data available? But then is the data really usable and digestible and user friendly? And so that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking about kind of these best practices or this other kind of ideal or gold standard. That's what we should be aiming for. And that's in all of the areas of education choice. But, obviously right now this is about open enrollment. So there's plenty of space, like I've said, for improvement. And I think we're going to get there, and mostly because we are in a new culture and a new era of education choice. Parents now realize and have this expectation that they can shop around, and they're going to be looking deeper for this kind of information.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description, and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.